Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today is Monday, so we are going to be doing poetry. We're going to start with several readings of poems, followed by breakout rooms. We are going to do a collaborative, I don't know what it is called. It is like the
RENGA.
Poetry version of Jenga.
No.
But yeah, it's called RENGA. And we'll find out what it is. You don't have to know it right away, but we'll find out what it is. And the theme is going to be new beginnings. All right, so with that, let me hand it over to Marissa. Marissa, go ahead.
Hi guys, I am quite looking forward to this exploration of the RENGA style with you. My first couple little banner things, just so you guys know, every poem that you read, I go ahead and find a link for it and set it up so we can put it in the hyper book for Poetry Mondays. If you read your own poem, I will reach out to you and ask permission if you would like for me to post your personal poem as well. If we do post it, it is in PDF version, so it can be viewed, but nobody can edit it, just so you guys know. And you're welcome to say, no, I'd rather not, and that's not a problem at all. You know, we want everybody comfortable here. So I just want to say that. Now, this poem here, this poem is fun because it actually is a bunch of different aspects that many of us have been exploring together. The poem is by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he is known for his views and thoughts on transcendentalism, which we have explored here a little bit together. And this poem specifically is called Brahm, which is a nod to the concepts that have been explored somewhat in the Gita, and because he did study the Gita and he was quite impressed with it, and he found that there were a lot of corollaries with Gita and transcendentalism. And so I had it in my list of poems that I thought should be the featured one here. So without much further ado, this is Brahm by Ralph Waldo Emerson. If the red slayer think he slays, or if the slain think he is slain, they know not well the subtle ways I keep and pass and turn again. Far or forgot to me is near. Shadow and sunlight are the same. The vanished gods to be appear, and one to me are shame and fame. They reckon ill who leave me out. When me they fly, I am the wings. I am the doubter and the doubt, and I the hymn the Brahmin sings. The strong gods pine for my abode, and pine in vain the sacred seven. But thou, meek lover of the good, find me and turn thy back on heaven. And as I mentioned, I did pick this poem specifically thinking of 52 Living Ideas and several of the themes we've been studying most recently. And I also just found it to be quite lovely and beautiful. And also it's a little bit of a force you to think poem. I think there's several different ways in which one can decipher some of these stanzas. So it's always fun to find a poem that gives you many hours of thought-provoking ideas. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marissa. So folks, go ahead and type ! to share a poem that you like. It can be a poem that somebody else has written or you have written. You're welcome to share. It's going to be DLJ, Allison, and Joe next. DLJ, go ahead. If you could go ahead and unmute.
Sorry, I thought I had. Yeah, so this isn't actually the poem. I just want to, I've got a question relating to the one Marissa just read out, because you put it in the description thing. So I read it before. I don't know what Sacred Seven is. I Googled it and I came up with some anime thing, Japanese, which I think is appropriate given what you just said we're going to do later. Yeah, any idea? Sacred Seven? I'm clueless.
I don't think so. I don't have any understanding of it. So we'll let it pass. There is just so much of large context to the Indian thought. So I don't know what he's referring to. I'll have to look it up. So next up is going to be Allison, Joe, Steve, Jyoti, Carol, and Marco. Allison.
Okay, this is My Bohemian Existence by Aurthur Rimbaud. Okay, I went off with my hands in my torn coat pockets. My overcoat too was becoming ideal. I traveled beneath the sky, muse, and I was your vassal. Oh dear me, what marvelous loves I dreamed of. My only pair of breeches had a big hole in them. Stargazing Tom Thumb. I sewed my rhymes along the way. My tavern was at the sign of the Great Bear. My stars in the sky rustled softly, and I listened to them. Sitting on the roadsides on those pleasant September evenings when I felt drops of dew on my forehead, like vigorous wine, and while rhyming among the fantastical shadows, I plucked the strings of a lyre, the elastics of my tattered boots, one foot close to my heart. I picked this one because, so I was just in New York visiting my son who's in art school in Brooklyn. And he lives really close to my apartment that I had when I was a dancer in Brooklyn. And it just kind of reminded me of that time. And I really got like kind of overwhelmed with all these memories in the last few days. And I feel like sometimes when you're 20 years old, you don't, especially if you're like an artist, a dancer, whatever, you're so focused on, and maybe every 20-year-old is, or maybe it's just me, I don't know, but you're so focused on worrying about things and the hole in the shoes, the hole here, the things you don't have, that you don't enjoy this amazing special time that it is. And, you know, most of those, you know, I was like hanging with him and his friends, and most of them, you know, very few people ever wind up like in a museum or whatever. But, you know, eventually they'll go and they'll find new lives and they'll have to get some job and they'll have to pay bills. But it'll always be this amazing experience. So I just, you know, as I read this, it kind of made me think about that, how, and I guess it's true of every age, that you really should just enjoy the ride, enjoy the moment, rather than always worrying about all the little things like the hole in the shoe or whatever. So I don't know.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Allison. Folks, you know, when you read a poem, you're welcome to talk about it for, you know, 2 to 4 minutes about whatever you get from the poem. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Steve. Joe.
So the poem I'll read this evening is titled Kindness by Naomi. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian and in the white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you. How he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows, and you see the seas of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze abread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. Yeah, I mean, we have to go through sometimes. We have to go through trials and tribulations, actually, to understand. Sometimes we have to go through the darkness to understand what it really means to be kind and actually understand what other people are going through. The one line that really stuck out to me in this particular poem is, then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Because once you actually have gone through things and you've really kind of gone through those trials and tribulations, and if you don't let them dominate you, if you don't let them overtake you with anger, you really understand what it means to be kind, because you understand why kindness is meaningful, because you would never want anybody to feel that way. There are two types, there are two types of individuals that we've covered this in depth in the Jordan Peterson meetups, is this the individuals that then harness resentment and look outside and blame the world. And then there's those that look internally and then, also figure out not only what happened to them, but they also understand themselves and how they felt in those moments. And I think that then you can take that and you can make it something special and better, to make your relationships better and make yourself more empathetic, as opposed to letting your anger dominate you. So I think that this is what really kind of spoke to me with this particular poem, is that you go through these trials and tribulations through life, and you have a choice how to behave in the future.
Wonderful, thank you. I want to comment on, I'm a little slow, so sometimes, a poem kind of percolates in the brain and slowly you kind of see. So firstly, I want to respond to Allison's comment. And I was thinking about the city, I also love the city dearly. And it's like everyday life, living like these kids are living, right? There is some grandeur to life itself. It's like this tremendous festival, and all of that is going on around you. And that experience is precious. Like, you can be focused on some things, on those holes in the socks, but the experience itself is actually forming you. It is like forming who you are. It is developing your expressions. And no matter what happens and what course you follow later on, some of that thing that you're building is like a reservoir that is going to keep building, keep actually giving you. So that was beautiful. The thing about kindness I can think of is that, like, when I remember back at people who are kind, right? It's like, it's very gentle. Kindness is not very loud. It's very gentle, but it speaks, it kind of remains with you, and it is precious. So it's like, it is there at the background, and it keeps this kind of light that keeps coming in. So wonderful, thank you. Next up is going to be Steve. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just make one really quick comment based on that?
Yeah.
I didn't mean to insinuate either that you had to go through something horrible in order to be kind. Some people just do it naturally as well. But it does speak volumes, and it just changes people. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Allison, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was thinking that, like, there's something just so beautiful about that. Each generation that, that New York is just like this beacon that just like attracts them, Like, it's funny because I had my hotel room had this amazing view of the Statue of Liberty. Well, it was far away, but you could see it, which I've never had. Like, if I'd lived like that, I never would have left the city, But it was like, not only does it attract immigrants from all over the world, it attracts artists from all over the world. And it's just amazing to, like, you just look at them, like, they just keep coming year after year, and it's beautiful. It's really magnificent.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, I can just go on and on about New York, because in some ways it is just, it's it's kind of welcoming to people from so many different backgrounds for so many different reasons.
Yeah.
And what that does is that it's like this amazing richness of humanity all around you. And everywhere you turn, there is more. And there is just really no end to it. Most people are afraid to kind of interface, but I talk to people very, just anybody, just, it's wonderful. It's just wonderful to see people from so many different places. And it's never, it was funny. Like like 1 week ago, I was walking by and this person, this guy looks at me like that. And I said, hi. So he says, oh, do you run 52 Living Ideas? And he had been watching our, Boyd videos. And he says, oh, so all kinds of amazing things. Thank you. Next up is Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight what Joe just said. When you're trying to get your happiness and joy from other people, they resent you and you resent them. So it's really a no-win situation there. So that's been kind of an epiphany for me this last month. So it was good to hear Joe say that. And it just reminded me that I have to come from within. This poem is by the German poet Rilke, entitled "Be Ahead of All Parting." Be ahead of all parting, as though it already were behind you, like the winter that has just gone by. For among these winters, there is one so endless winter that only by wintering through it will your heart survive. Be forever dead in Eurydice, more gladly arise into the seamless life proclaimed in your song. Here in the realm of decline, among the momentary days, be the crystal cup that shattered even as it rang. Be, and yet know the great void where all things begin, the infinite source of your own most intense vibration, so that this once you may give it your perfect assent. To all that is used up, and to all the muffled and dumb creatures in the world full reserve, the unsaleable sums, joyfully add yourself and cancel the count. This was written at the end of Rilke's life in the early 1900s. It deals with, dealing with death and loss, how we, deal with those twin things. And of course, the title, Be Ahead of All Parting. I like the automatopoeia, that line, be the crystal cup that shattered even as it rang. And to me, the theme is there's that kind of twin desire of us humans to hold fast to our beloved people, our beloved objects, and at the same time surrendering to a greater power. So there's that twin tension there, that unbearable tension that we go back and forth with. This was a collection of the sonnets to Orpheus. Is everyone familiar with the Orpheus Eurydice myth, or do I need to review it?
Please do review it. It's a myth. These myths are worth reviewing, even if you know them. Go ahead.
Okay, so Orpheus was like our current Eric Clapton. he was a very gifted musician. He was a very gifted musician. And he married Eurydice, and on their wedding day, she was bitten by a snake and died and was taken to the underworld. Orpheus wanted to go and get his wife, and he went down into the underworld and he played this beautiful music. And Hades said, okay, you can take Eurydice back to the upper world. But one thing you may not do is you cannot turn around while she is still in the underworld. If you do, you will lose her. And so as they were moving up into the upper world, just as Orpheus was reaching the top rung to step into the light, he turned around to see if Eurydice was behind him. And of course, by turning around, he lost her forever. And that line, forever dead in Eurydice, has some meaning to me. If someone would like to add their interpretation, I'd appreciate it, because it says be forever dead in Eurydice. So that's kind of open to interpretation. The line that stood out in the poem was the infinite source of your own most intense vibration. I thought that was a very profound line. It seemed very modern to me, the crystal cup, vibrations. It seems, very relevant to us today, and it seems to still be meaningful. Also that line, for among these winters, there is one so endless winter that only by wintering through it will your heart survive. If anyone would like to give a take on that. Most of the time we, hear the word soldier through something, but he says winter through the winter. So that's very clever. I don't pretend to know what that means, but why he chose that, particular word there, but it was very meaningful to me.
Wonderful. Daniela, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on the winter through the winter. I don't know what exactly he was referring to, but it's reminiscent of when I think about Carl Jung and the only way around your problem is through it. So you have to winter through your winter. There's no other way around it, and you can't escape it. Even if you try, you'll still be in it. So that's what it reminded me of.
Wonderful, excellent. I was thinking exactly of the same thing. The various quotes of going through the, facing your shadow, going, in the filth it would be found. It's a way of kind of saying you have to go through, you have to face the darkness in order to, come into the light. Carol, you had something. Go ahead. Carol, would you like to say something?
Yes, it would help if I took myself off mute.
Yes.
Yes, I said part of this sort of reminds me of my former father-in-law, who was a soldier during the Battle of the Bulge. He was part of the 82nd Airborne that, fought through, that terrible battle. So he's kind of wintering through everything. I mean, he's, in snow up to his waist kind of thing. So I'm sure his winter seemed endless at that point, It was, one miserable slog. So I think sometimes when I look back at that, I can say, okay, if he had the heart to go through this, maybe just by connection, I might also have the heart, you know.
Yes, I
And
just want to add one thing. Sorry to interrupt. I
Sure.
mean, it is because those people like your father-in-law wintered through the winter that we have the freedom that we have. You know, it's basically, it is their work. It is their
yes,
determination, their slogging through the hardest times that made a lot of things possible for a lot of us. So please go on.
right. And also my grandfather, on my father's side, basically had escaped from Siberia because he was a deserter in the Russian army. And if they catch up with you, they tend to chunk you somewhere that's less desirable. So there he was, but he slogged somehow from Siberia to, you know, what's now Lithuania. So I mean, that was a very long, long slog.
Yes, absolutely. And again, you know, it is people like that, right, who make the life of their children much
Right.
better than the life
Right.
that they themselves had. And they go through, I mean, that's what most immigrants go through. I mean, this is an extreme situation of Siberia. But if you look
Yeah.
at, you know, kind of the immigrant stories, you know, they basically leave everything behind. They come to a new country. It is hard for them. And
Yeah.
they build, but because of what they do, they give a much better start to their kids.
Yeah. And also, the last thing, coincidentally, I happened to read a poem by Maya Angelou about masks. And there is one part of that poem where she's talking about her fathers or grandfathers or whatever, who are sitting on a bench, you know, that the slats, you know, are marking, you know, their flanks, you know, their butts, you know. And she's thinking about, well, for them, and they had to put on a mask to survive, you know, and they had to grin and smile and kind of shuffle along because that was kind of what was expected of them. But they did that, and they did it for the kids.
Yes.
It was for me so that your world can go round, you know?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Carol. Fantastic examples. Next up is going to be Jyoti.
Yeah, hi. I'm going to again read a poem by Rumi. And what the title is, When I Am With You, Everything is Prayer. I prayed for change, so I changed my mind. I prayed for guidance and learned to trust myself. I prayed for happiness and realized I'm not my ego. I prayed for peace and I learned to accept others unconditionally. I prayed for abundance and realized my doubt kept it out. I prayed for wealth and realized it is my health. I prayed for a miracle and realized I'm the miracle. I prayed for a soulmate and realized I'm with one. I prayed for love and realized it is always knocking, but I have to allow it in. Thank you. So this prayer, Rumi's prayers actually touch my heart. They touch my soul. This prayer reminds me when you are disillusioned in your life, and you are not sure what is it that you want, but slowly you are coming to self-realization. And through that, you say, okay, I'm going to pray because now I know what I want. So these verses, they remind me of when a person is looking for a change and he's looking for guidance. So he's praying for all these things. And these prayers are putting him on track and giving him the virtues that he can take in life and live with them forever. Thank you.
Jyoti, that was beautiful. Could you read it one more time, please?
Okay, the whole poem?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. I prayed for change, so I changed my mind. I prayed for guidance and learned to trust myself. I prayed for happiness and realized I'm not my ego. I prayed for peace and learned to accept others unconditionally. I prayed for abundance and realized my doubt kept it out. I prayed for wealth and realized it is my health. I prayed for miracles and realized I'm the miracle. I prayed for the soulmate and realized I'm with one. I prayed for love and realized it is always knocking, but I have to allow it in.
Wonderful. I really like this poem. I mean, the thing I like about it, I think the last verse captures it, like captures the pattern of all the other ones. Like you're looking for something and you're expecting it to find it in a certain way, but actually you kind of, in the seeking itself, you're losing your ability to kind of experience it and capture it. Let me see here. Give me just a second. Edwin, you had something? Go ahead.
Yes. Can I read my poem to you guys or not?
Let's do one thing. Let's wait for you to wait your turn. Okay.
Oh, how many people are behind me?
About
in front of me?
five people.
All right.
Okay.
I'll wait then.
All right. Thanks. Next up is going to be Carol.
Okay. I think first, before I start, I just would like to have one thought on the kindness. And I always find kindness to be like an ocean, you know, it's just big and we all kind of dissolve into it. So that's just my thought on kindness. And now for my poem. Let's see, hold on. Yeah. This is a poem I wrote called Sunflowers. So, is there any value to a flower in a time of war? The sunflower follows the sun, like our heart follows the hope. The seeds of the sunflower repeat in the golden ratio. Eternal beauty falls to the mud. The seeds of the sunflower given to the occupier as a curse, that they may sprout from his corpse. What flower grows from corpses? What seeds does it give its children? Holodomor memorial sunflowers remember when people ate its seeds and its stubble. To pour to feed the machines, false by feckless lovers, Ukraine gave away its nukes and planted sunflowers in their silos. Chernobyl sunflowers drink up radioactive soil to heal the Earth's body. And yet the new sunflowers still follow the sun. Threats of Armageddon, nuclear sun, nuclear winter. Can sunflowers clean even this? We the dead are watching. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie beneath the sunflowers. We the dead are watching. Our eyes follow the sun. Our hearts follow the hope. So a few references in case people didn't catch everything. The Holodomor was the massive famine caused by, Joseph Stalin. So a large section of Ukraine was cordoned off and all the food was removed, causing starvation of millions of people. And the sunflowers that were planted at Chernobyl was because they found sunflowers could actually soak up the radioactive toxins from the soil and detoxify it. And I think as part of that, in the Bucharest Agreement, Ukraine was promised security when it dismantled the nukes that were left behind when the Soviet Union collapsed. And so as a sign of peace and guaranteeing, security for Ukraine, sunflowers were planted in the silos. And finally, the quote, "We the dead are watching. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie," is a quote from the poem Flanders Field by John Mccrae, commemorating the soldiers who died at Flanders Field. So only, if you just look at the period between the end of July and the middle of November, 600,000 people died in Flanders Field. So, so that's my poem.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Really appreciate it. Next up is going to be Marco, followed by Paul. Marco.
This is called Old Men Playing Basketball by B.H. Fairchild. The heavy bodies lunge the broken language of fake and drive, glamorous jump shot, slowed to a stutter, their gestures in love. Again, with the pure geometry of curves, rise toward the ball, falter and fall away. On the boards, their hands and fingertips tremble in tense little prayers of reach and balance, then the grind of bone. And socket, the caught breath, the sigh, the grunt of the body laboring to give birth to itself in their toiling and grand sweeps. I wonder, do they still make love to their wives, kissing the undersides of their wrists, dancing the old soft shoe of desire, and on the long walk home from the VFW, do they still sing? To the drunken moon stands full, clock moving, the one in army fatigues, and house shoes says to himself, pick and roll, and the phrase sounds musical as ever. Radio crooning songs of love after the game, the girl leaning back in the Chevy's front seat as her raven hair flames in the shuddering light of the outdoor movie, and now he drives, gliding toward the net, a glass wand of autumn light breaks over the backboard. Boys rise up in old men, wings begin to sprout at their backs. The ball turns in the darkening air. I liked the imagery, and you could really sort of like picture the scene. And also, yeah, it just catches like, you sort of see the age in these men playing, but sort of like the game brings out the boy in them, and yeah, just the imagery at the end of wings begin to sprout at their backs. That was like a powerful image.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marco. Next up is going to be Paul.
Hello, thanks, Shrikant. These poems I'm going to read and the troubles that people have gone through that others have referred to just remind me that it's kind of a luxury to sit and write the poems about nature that I'm going to read, that as Shrikant said, someone may have had to earn that for you. And these people had the chance to capture something incredible. I'm going to read. I also want to do this as a tribute to my 98-year-old mother who passed away just this last week. And she was a veteran of World War II at a whole different time when causes were pretty cut and dried in most people's mind. And that whole generation did what we're talking about, and she was in it. But I would read her this book of haiku in the evenings. So as a memory and tribute to her, and because you said you're doing RENGA or something, which I think was the predecessor, I will read a few of them just about awe, the awe of just a moment, and the moment. That can be a new beginning just from something simple as what this talks about. So I'll just read 4 of them, and then one quick poem by Chelan Harkin. Still won't take long. Is that okay, Shrikant?
Please take your time,
Okay.
Paul.
Okay. So this book was structured in the seasons. I guess I'll give you the book in the chat, but I'll read different ones from different seasons. Today I tramp along in silence, for no hymn of mine could match the spring wind's song. The reflected moon shall make a pillow for the bird that floats asleep upon the lake. The snow fell in the night, and I forgot my morning prayer. So lovely is the sight. This lovely summer morn, hushed is the voice of every man in wonder at the dawn. So just the sheer awe of nature, just from such simple things expressed in so few words. Thanks for letting me read that. I'm now going to read something in the same spirit, and thank you, Jyoti, for bringing up Rumi, one of my total inspirations in life. And Shaylan Harkin, this poet I've read before and Marissa knows about, got her inspiration from Hafiz, she says, who's one of Rumi's in a similar vein. But I'll read her poem called I Don't Know What to Call It. I don't know what to call it, so I call it God. That exquisite flowering of every piece of me I had once relegated to the shadows. Or what happens when poetry opens its fist in my heart, setting light free. The seed didn't know what to call it either. This song, this relationship, this thing that led to the exquisite unfoldment of its own nameless self. If you come up with a better name, let me know. Until then, I'll call it God, the one who moves me to dip the cup of consciousness into the waters of existence and whispers from every ordinary, precious moment, drink deep. Thank you.
Oh, Paul, can I ask you for a favor? Can you read it one more time?
Absolutely. It deserves reading.
Who's the poet?
A miracle. She's Rumi walking upon the earth. Her name is Shaylan Harkin. I will put her in the chat. And Marissa and I got to see her in a live thing recently.
Oops, sorry, Paul, I muted you by mistake. Sorry, go ahead. Paul, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I see. Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I always try to improve the quality of the sound. Sometimes I screw up. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I'll make sure my volume is up too while I'm talking, but the poet's name is Shaylan Harkin, and she, I believe, is a Rumi walking upon the earth today. I have such a high opinion of her. So I will read it again. This is from the book Let Us Dance. The other ones I've read are from a different book called Susceptible to Light. I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to call it, so I call it God. That exquisite flowering of every piece of me I had once relegated to the shadows. Or what happens when poetry opens its fist in my heart, setting light free. The sea didn't know what to call it either. This song, this relationship, this thing that led to the exquisite unfoldment of its own nameless self. If you come up with a better name, let me know. Until then, I'll call it God, the one who moves me to dip the cup of consciousness into the waters of existence and whispers from every ordinary, precious moment, drink deep.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate that. Beautiful. And, you know, my condolences. And what happens is that, you know, I'm glad that you read the haikus, because that is the best way of celebrating a great life. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
All right. So now we're going to do the breakout rooms. Can Marissa and Allison describe what we are planning to do?
Absolutely. I'm going to describe it with some show and tell here. So what we're looking at here, we're going to do RENGA. A RENGA style actually is two different small types of poems put together. This is just a little bit here to let you know what a RENGA is. So the RENGA has a haiku, followed by a couplet, followed by a haiku, followed by a couplet. And it's kind of, it's like a handoff. It's like, you know, when you do a relay race, you run your little lap and you hand the baton over to the next person and they run their little lap. That's the way this poem progresses. One person writes their section and passes it, and the next writes theirs. So we're going to give that a shot. We're looking at the theme of new beginnings. I have here for you an example of how it will work. And you know, I have a silly poem here, you know. So poet one writes a haiku. This is a RENGA, or at least the first stanza. Okay, now your turn. It has the syllables spelled out for you there. And then poet one gives it to poet two, and poet two does a couplet. And they'll say, here's my response. I'm eating many more crisps than normal. Poet two hands it to poet three. And now it's back to doing a haiku. Great start, everyone. I hope this haiku lives up to your high standards. Poet three hands it to poet four. Thanks for sharing. I love to collaborate with my friends. The syllabic pattern is 5-7-5 and then 7-7. I will put that in the chat for you guys. We're looking at a theme here, but you know, it's very broad scope, new beginnings. If you find you're having too much trouble with the separation of haiku, couplet, haiku, you can change it up, you know, within your group. If you guys decide it's too hard and you'd rather just everybody do haikus, there's no way to go wrong here. Whatever you come up with is going to be lovely and beautiful. This is the guideline. This is what we're aiming for. If you can't get there, just aim for it. And wherever you land is still going to be good.
How about I think Allison has quite a bit of experience with this. Allison, how would you describe RENGA?
Well, I do find that when I've taught this, people get really hung up on the rhyme schemes and the syllables. And so sometimes it takes a little longer than you think, but I just figured just go with it. And also with the couplet, I know in that example, it was 7 syllables. It doesn't have to be 7. You just want it to be the same number. But
fair.
We'll give it a shot and try. Yeah.
All right. So we'll do it for 20 minutes and let's see what
question.
Go ahead.
And the couplets have to rhyme. Isn't that correct?
No.
Isn't that a couplet? 2 lines that rhyme?
You can make them rhyme, but they don't have to.
Right. It's not a requirement.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So Marissa is going to be the facilitators in one of the rooms and Allison in the other. Let's see what we come up with. And Allison and Marissa are going to keep track of what people produce, and we'll get to hear both the results when we come back, and then we will have a general discussion on poetry, starting the breakout rooms now. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. All right. So how did it go? Who wants to go first? Allison?
That was tough. There you go. That's my comment. That was hard work.
Allison, go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna put it into the chat here right now. Okay, did that get everything? Yeah. All right, I'm just gonna read it off of this one. All right. The rain fell down, down. Red tulips eagerly drank. Budding flowers wait. The moist air awakened me, but left me with a sadness. The green seed breaks ground, red energy bursting forth, feeding from white light. The pungent scent fills me whole and readies me for the day. With so much new light, I cannot be cautious now, so I disappear, leaving the shore away from safety, sailing off into the deep unknown.
Very good. How about we have Marissa read and then share any experiences or what it was like. Marissa, go ahead.
Right, you asked for it. I've one job as a heterosexual male, to impregnate you. I've many jobs to say no, no. Spring, plants, trees, babies, life bursting all around us. Come on, let's begin. Let us start over again, wiping the slate clean of pain. The score is even, or so it seems, but then I've had so many dreams. The time has gone past coldly through when all my thoughts were thoughts of you. One day when the wind blows the ocean to the sky, then we will begin. Try to raise a drunken head from sodden pillow to frantic bed. What mom told me with a cup of tea, and yet I smell his drunken breath. Hey, give me a new home where them buffaloes roam. A new beginning beyond our differences for all of us now. Blown by the ocean into desire, me looking down, tempered by desire.
Okay. What was this experience like and how did it compare with the previous ones that we have done? Do you guys prefer this one or do you guys, any thoughts? Let's start with, I'm going to start with the moderators first and then go to others. But go ahead. Who would like to go? Marissa, go ahead.
I'll start. I found this to be much harder than the other format we've done. Sadly, I got the feeling that it was not as enjoyable for some of our participants, which kind of makes me sad. So it was just a little bit harder, and it's so, I don't know. I mean, I think I'm still super amazed that we came out with a poem, which is kind of cool, right? For all our blundering, we at the end came with a poem. But yeah, there's a different feel. The collaboration seemed less collaborative with this format because it was you were just passing the baton. You had to come up with your own little section and then pass it to the next person. So it was there was a little less joy in collaboration with this one.
Got it. Got it. Next up is going to be Allison, Dlj, and Paul. Allison.
Yeah, I felt the same thing. I felt like sometimes because it's such a structured and way of writing that it's harder. It's definitely harder. I mean, it gives me a profound appreciation for Shakespeare. You know, I mean, I don't know how he wrote an iambic pentameter. I just don't know what he did.
But he also didn't have to hand off every other line to somebody else.
Yeah. And it's harder. You know, you're trying to say what you want to say, and then you're going, wait, too many syllables, not enough syllables. Does it rhyme? Does it not rhyme? Does it, you know, it's hard. I don't know.
And if you want to talk about tulips, but the person who goes before you wants to talk about babies, do you consider how to tie that in, or do you not care about tying it in? Or can you tie it in?
Right.
Very good. So
Yeah,
let's have Dlj and Paul weigh in, and then we can decide what to do with this. Dlj.
Yeah, I think actually Maritza's pretty much said what I was going to say. So the time pressure, it felt short compared to previous. I don't know whether the same time was allocated before to this one, but this felt hard, time pressure. But at the same time, there was a kind of adrenaline surge when because you've got to create something in a structure within that time. So that was, I did actually quite enjoy that. The bit that wasn't so pleasurable was the fact you didn't have time to digest what other people were writing, which is pretty much what Maritza said. So I had my own flow of what I was thinking. So I was kind of paying less attention. And so I wasn't really feeding off what was there already.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was reading it, and it was obviously going in, but I'd want like 30 minutes to take in 2 lines from somebody else. So I really think about, okay. And so that was tough. The time pressure was tough.
Perfect. Next up is Paul, Carol, and Steve. Paul.
Yeah, I'll say, trying to say something a little different because I feel the same, but I've talked before in this group about this process I talked about it with songwriting, where you get a burst of an inspiration and it's wild. It's sort of wild in a wild form. And then you have to basically tame it into a structure. And in our other versions of this, you didn't have to do much taming. You would just say your thing. And because there was no structure, and then it came out really interesting, I think. But now you both have to have the burst of inspiration and tame it right there in 1 minute. Give me a break, man. I can't do it. But that's it. Yeah.
I can tell you as a spectator of this, because I did not participate in the breakout rooms, the quality of these poems is much, much lower than everything else that we have produced in earlier versions. And it shows. It's because what happens is that it's too much structure. And it's so I think our previous ones, we have to, we have to go back to the previous versions. This is not working. But I want to get other people's feedback. Carol and Steve. Carol.
Yes, I kind of got the feeling when I reflect on it, it might have been in a sense better if we were like, I don't know, I think there's a palace in Korea where the king and the nobleman would sit, and the palace was surrounded by water, and there would be cups of wine that floated through the water, and everybody would pick up their cup. And as you picked up your cup, you said your part of a poem. So maybe it might have been better if we all had wine to go kind of loosen up and say, okay, I don't care, structure, no structure,
No.
I'm just going to do my thing, but yeah, I'm going to try for a structure,
And a good thing, Carol, is that we do have, this is an experiment, and we've been doing different styles before, which have worked really, really well. So we have that. We were just trying out this new style. Steve.
I enjoyed the challenge myself. And if you do examine our poem, you can see like a unity there. It could have actually been written by one person. So there was a synchronicity that worked really well for people who just wrote their haikus separately from each other, not knowing the next line. And still it's pretty cogent and coherent.
Yeah, but it looks like majority prefers the previous format. So we'll just go back to the previous format. I think people enjoy. It's important that people feel the points that both Marissa and Allison made, and basically everybody else kind of mostly supported it. Is that this is not as joyous. There's not as much collaboration, and so I think our previous thing of saying, okay, let's focus on a topic. And let us be a little bit flexible about what people say, and then work together on kind of putting it together seems to be a better way. What do you think, Marissa?
I think I agree. I think the biggest problem, so to Steve's point, with double the time, we would have had a natural stop in the relay race, and you would have had reflection upon what was written, and you would have had the time to tweak it. And just the time here, it's not enough time for what we're trying to do. And so some of the depth is missing because we're busy ensuring everyone gets a voice. So we have to build breadth with this poem. There's a requirement to continue to build it. And so a little bit of the depth is lost, I think, and not that one can't get the depth from this type of poem, but I think for our format, it's just not quite right. Because with the format we've done in the past, there was more time to both get everyone's voice plus a cohesion and some kind of, what I really like the way DLJ said it, is that there wasn't enough time to process what other people were saying or writing, because you had to be thinking of your line in a specific format and after them. So, and we did a little bit of at the same time, and even then it wasn't quite enough to process. Last week, you know, what we did was free form poetry, free verse, and everybody just threw out a line in whatever order they wanted, however they wanted, but it fed off of what was already up there on the board. So we had time to process as we went along. And it just created a little more cohesion. And there was also more time to contemplate on the focus and theme. Here, there was less time. Like, you kind of knew in the back of your head that you wanted new beginnings. And so you're like, oh, choice words that make you think of new beginning. Whereas last week, we had the time to say, this is the theme. Where are we going with this?
Allison, followed by Paul. Allison.
Yeah, I think like the way we did it before worked so much better, because you're not put on the spot like, oh, it's my turn, I have to go now, I have to think of something. So as everyone's like going along, you know, you're kind of like percolating ideas. And then once you come up with your line, you're like, wait, how about this? And then we can also work on lines together and kind of like, but how about if we change this word or that word? And I don't know, I just like that part better.
Paul.
I wonder how it would work. And before we completely abandon the idea of this whole idea, or the thought of doing this with some structure, I would have probably done better if I only had to do one line. Like, okay, Paul, 5 syllables. Okay, you know, Marissa, 7 syllables. You know, I don't know, maybe that would be a variation on it. Just a thought.
Sure. All right, wonderful.
Mind.
Wonderful. So I want to now raise the, other questions about poetry. So, I mean, one of the implicit questions here is this dance between creativity and structure. In production of your art, production of anything that you're making, how do you see this structure? I mean, clearly, structure is important. Clearly, the creativity kind of free flow is important. How do you build in both the structure and the free flowing nature in the same piece of art? What are your thoughts? Go ahead and type exclamation mark. It's Cho followed by Steve. Cho.
I think this is an example where you could use form follows function. Like when essentially you're focused too much on the structure, the form, as opposed to actually what the function is supposed to be. And so that you need a certain amount of structure, as you had already mentioned. And structure can help you be more creative, just as constraints can help you be more creative in certain circumstances. But when you start managing to those constraints, as opposed to trying to figure out new ways around those constraints, I think it becomes a little bit more of a challenge, or it becomes actually, harmful to whatever you're trying to produce. I mean, I like unstructured a lot better in general, but that's just me. I mean, to some degree, though, you absolutely, I think there's too much structure in general, it can be, I don't mean, also when you're talking about art, it's a little bit different. I think that it's a little bit, you know, when you're talking about art versus something that, you know, maybe you're thinking of a solution to a problem.
Thank you. So you make, you know, I mean, there's one more, you know, thanks to what you said, I wanted to clarify one thing. I think the way in which this plays out varies from a person to person within ranges. So for example, some people are comfortable with less structure and they can produce a lot of things with relatively less structure, whereas other people require more structure in order to produce. So there is personal preferences. There's also preferences based on how familiar you are with what you're doing, how much of your kind of automatic processes have built in some structures already. So you don't need an explicit structure for that. It also depends on the area that you're working in, that is connected to the second point about the familiarity. So there are all kinds of, you know, all kinds of details about how this thing works. So considering all of that, you can answer it any way. You can take this along any direction that you see fit. Just talk about your own kind of creative process and what works for you, and how do you manage the issue of structure and free flow in your production of art. So next up is going to be Steve, Paul, and Allison. Steve.
I don't really have a preference when I write or when I read between free verse and rhyming poems, but I will defer to Robert Frost, who said free verse is like playing tennis with a net down.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Next up is Paul.
Yeah, most of my reference points about this are music. So I'm thinking about jazz, and I'm thinking about the great guitarist Wes Montgomery. And I saw Emily Rumler, another great guitarist, talking about great Wes Montgomery, and she said he was about 60% licks. By that, if you know a set of common chord progressions, they're sort of standard, they're almost like cliche melodic fragments. It looks to the layman like you're improvising, but you're doing a lick that you might put in any number of places, and he was maybe 30 or 40% completely improvising, but it was still against a progression. So I guess it just speaks to your point, Shrikant, that like even those guys who did Renga in whatever century it was, I wouldn't be surprised if they just walked around all day thinking about, oh yeah, 5, I'm going to the, then they know they can just throw, you know, they had their licks, you know? So
can you define what exactly is meant by licks?
Yeah. Something like that's blues lick, or blues lick.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Wonderful.
So people have these licks and they combine them in all kinds of unique new ways, but everyone does some of it. There's no jazz musician that doesn't use those creatively in some form, including all the greats. So
wonderful. I want to pick up on this example of music and build on it. I want to look at the comparison between Beethoven and Mozart. And there is a lot of data. You know, for example, the JP Morgan library over here has the original scores of both of them, of how they wrote. And they're so different. They are so different. Both, I love both of them. But the way in which Mozart is that he, you know, no matter what phrase you pick, whether it is just like 3 notes or whether it is this entire thing, it just flows from him. It is just an expression of how his mind works. It has just this immense beauty in any piece that it has.
What is
Beethoven, on the other hand, is actually telling you a story. It is a very large progression, and it is like Beethoven's is like a throw. He's throwing something and it's going to land somewhere, and it's going to do all kinds of fireworks in this arc. It's a long arc, and it makes, so everything that he's doing is actually adding up. It's going to be connected to something over there, something over there. So it's this massive structure. And you can see it in their work. So if you look at actually Beethoven's original manuscripts, they are all scribbled up. They are, he's doing something, he's changing it. He's saying, no, it should be like this. Whereas Mozart just sits and writes, and that's it. He can probably just sit, not probably, he can sit at a piano and produce the kind of music that he produces. Paul, go ahead. You want to continue on this?
Just very, you're hitting a really sore spot with me, because I'm going to post in the chat a link by Glenn Gould, the famous pianist, who basically claimed that Mozart was all licks, that most of it was pedestrian, that he was mailing in a set of arpeggios, scalar sequences, circle of fifths, these common artifices of the day. And the reason he could write so fast is he was just stringing licks together. I know that's highly controversial, but I kind of agree with it on many of his symphonies. But there's ways of wondering, how can someone write so fast? Well, they're pulling these fragments that are standard of their time in a slightly new way, or else they couldn't. Those weren't straight from heaven.
Yeah, no.
They were not. But anyway, that's my thought.
If you want to get even more controversial on Mozart, I just saw something today that actually there's somebody who's claiming, or more than somebody, a group of people who are claiming that this African composer who was born in Guadeloupe and made it over to France, he wrote a lot of the music that Mozart actually plagiarized. So I'll just toss that one in.
Sure, thank you. So what I would say is that, I don't know about these things, but I can hear the music. I can hear the sheer joy of expression. You can call it licks, you can call it kind of standard patterns, but there is a way of putting these things together. So, okay, I would say several things. One is that music and expression is all about internalizing things. It is all about making something part of you and then just letting it flow out of you. That's how, and that's how all art works. And a great musician actually brings in so much music, so many patterns. And then really the challenge is, how do you make it flow? Some people make it flow where there is beauty to it and it really flows. It has life to it. And most people who are not at that level will give you some things which are kind of mechanical putting together of the patterns. And clearly, at least for me, as best as I know music, Mozart has that ability of making things flow and making things really, really speak to your soul and to be able to kind of see the beauty. And I am not a big fan of the player of Glenn Gould, so he's more mechanical kind of a person for me. So I'm not. So I would take that. I take it with a grain of salt. I prefer the musicality of Mozart to musicality of Glenn Gould. So I think Mozart is likely to be more right. But there is always these patterns of that you take in all the music. Like one of my favorite ways in which one of my favorite quotes from Ella Fitzgerald is that she says, "I stole everything." Okay, that's what you do when you're a musician. You steal everything. You hear everything. You take all the sounds. It may be a bird singing. Okay, you take all of that in, and then you sing with it. All right, let's see. I don't know. I've completely lost track of who is next. Give me just a second.
I think it was Allison.
Allison, go ahead.
So, well, writing poetry, I mean, I haven't written poetry in so long until we're doing this, so I have to go by choreographing. What I find that I always have to do is I find music first, and then I have to just kind of like just listen to it over and over and over again, and then I feel like it starts telling me what to do. And but what I do is a lot of it's very, very free flowing at first, and then I start to edit it. And then what I do is then I start asking my dancers to do things, because sometimes it won't look the way I want it, or I'm like, try this. No, that's not quite right or not. But by the end, it's like, basically, I mean, I guess it's like starting with chaos and then winding up with something very, very ordered and very structured. But I have to start with that whole, it's like brainstorming, really. I have to start there. And then, but then I start bringing in, and then because there's just certain things that you do that, but like Beethoven, like I want it to have kind of an arc, like a story, like where there's like conflict and resolution. And so I try to build all of that into it. But it's really like a winnowing down process, but it starts with this very like free flowing kind of thing. And then it's really the editing that gives it the structure.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think editing, like, I will apply to this to writing. Writing is mostly editing. I like my friend Rob Trasinski has this really powerful idea, very simple idea, very powerful for writing. And I think it applies to all kind of production of art. And that is, you keep on, you have these two faculties. You have the analytical faculty and you have the creative faculty. You have the deliberative faculty and you have the automatic faculty. Both these are very different from each other. And you really need to alternate between them until you come with something that you like. So he describes, writing process as firstly saying, what do I really want to write about? So you're kind of going back to your subconscious and say, what do I have to say? And then you put something out, like there'll be like 5 different things. Then you can use the analytical faculty to say, which of these things I have a lot to say on. And then you would say, okay, of all these things, this one. Okay, now you can use the analytical faculty to say, okay, what's the proper beginning? What's the proper end? And what are the main things in the middle? So some kind of a skeleton. Then you just go and up to when you have a reasonable skeleton, you just let it flow and just write the whole thing out. And you will find that you're going to produce something which is completely unexpected. Then you go back into your analytical faculty, look as if somebody else has written this and restructure it, make it clearer, make it, remove unnecessary things, make it more streamlined. Then you keep it aside and then you come back to it with your creative faculty and say, this doesn't flow at all. Let me make it flow. And keep doing that of these loops of criticism or kind of analytical thing and creative thing until it kind of begins to really sing. And once you're happy, so what you have as a result of it is it has structure and it has that element of freedom in it. So that's how he talks about it. I think that's just beautiful. I find it extremely useful. I use it all the time. Next up is Marissa.
Oh, and I have to disagree with you just a little tiny bit here.
Please. You can disagree a lot.
Fair. All right, I've been warned. So, I have walked, I write poetry and I have all my life. I find I don't necessarily disagree with the process you just described, but to me, I don't necessarily hear you describing the process of writing a poem. It could be the process, I will grant that. But to me, sometimes there are lines that take on a life of their own. The moment they are put to paper, it's impossible to change them. There are some things that flow that way. They come out as they want to come out, and they will not allow you to change them. I have had times when I write something and I rate, and this is terribly illogical, and I hear it as I'm saying it, and the logical side of my brain is cringing. And yet I'm still saying it because I find it to be truth that sometimes when a line or a phrase comes onto the paper, I may erase it to change it because I think it sounds better differently, or to rearrange it. But it actually physically bothers me. I have to go back and put it back and write it back in. It wants to be there. And I know that this is personification of, inanimate words. And yet I'm still saying that here. And and I love the pattern making aspect to poetry. I really do. But I find that is just one aspect of the manner in which poetry unfolds. Like I do love, just my idea of doodling is to grab a sheet of paper and to put the, Allison was talking about iambic pentameter, or that's catnip to me. I really like all that. I like making things in certain syllables, certain rhyming schemes, all of that. I love playing around, experimenting. But then there are these poems that form in an entirely different way. And maybe it's as simple as what you were saying, the analytic versus the emotional. Maybe we're actually talking the same thing. But there are times, like if I'm having a very challenging day and I just sit down with a piece of paper, because it's either that or grab the scotch. But sometimes both, actually. I quite recommend that. If you sit down with a piece of paper and scotch, good things come out. But anyway, sometimes it just flows so rapidly from mind to paper that I'm not convinced that there's a lot of processing happening inside. It hits the page immediately. And sometimes I can spend 3 months writing a poem, and sometimes I can have an entire page of a poem in as long as it takes to drink a scotch. But those are the poems that I'm less likely to share. But if I'm honest with myself, some of those are the very best poems I've written. The intensity, the emotionality, and yet they can still rhyme, because that's just how I am. I can still make it rhyme and such, but the process is so vastly different. It's and I've said this twice now, but I feel that poetry, it's it is an art form in such that sometimes one molds the clay, and sometimes one is just unveiling what already exists within the clay. And I hope that makes a little bit of sense, but that's kind of the way I view poetry. And I think, because I spend so much time with it, that to me, I think it fills both of those roles. Thank you.
No, that's wonderful, wonderful observation. So, so there are several things here. Somebody like Michelangelo would immediately agree with you. He would say, yeah, that's what you do. You see a stone and you see what is there in it, and you just go. But the thing is that the complexity is there in us. what happens is that the way in which we actually build our faculties, there is this, when you've been doing something for a long time, whether learning how to sing, whether writing poetry, whether doing sculpting, you reach a stage where both your analytical and the creative faculties actually learn to kind of work with each other fairly in unison, and you can kind of make it work directly. And like more and more kind of gets built in the structure. Like, for example, Allison was saying about, the iambic pentameter, but I'm sure somebody like Shakespeare has built that into his brain already. So it's like, it will be difficult for him not to speak in iambic pentameter. They say, okay, how do I do that? I keep doing that. So what I'm saying is that there is a lot of automatization that is going on, tremendous amount. The second part is that there is an issue of personal versus kind of public. What happens is that in order to make something clear to other people, you probably have to do more of the analytical faculty. You have to look at it from another perspective. So it depends on what your purpose is or what kind of thing that you're producing. So the poetry is different than, for example, writing an article, right? When you're writing an article, it could be you want to make sure that other people understand it. So there is that. So like, how will other people interface with this work of art is a valid thing an artist can ask. But there are kinds of art where you don't need to ask that. So that's another kind of another variable that I see. But I can hear, like, I can understand what you're saying, like, you put something down and you just know that it is right and you don't want to touch it, and your mind will rebel against wanting to do anything with it, because it is an expression. It is a genuine expression of an authentic emotion, authentic thought put forth. And though it may seem possible to improve it, but in the process, you will kind of disturb its unity. And you don't want to do that. So I fully understand it, but these are the things that I see. Next, Marissa, if you have something, you can go ahead. Otherwise, we'll go to Paul, followed by Allison. Paul.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. You guys are filling me with thoughts, so I got to be careful. I would say, but to your point, you're both, in my mind, completely right, of course, but the automation Shrikant talks about, poetry is so different than music, because Marissa, you're already a deep expert in words. You're a deep expert in language, just by being a human who's been speaking for your whole life and thinking in words. Whereas a musician has to learn a vocabulary and move their fingers. And so my point is, that thing that comes out spontaneously from you is actually a result of huge amounts of structures that have been formed in your mind that suddenly appear as if they're coming from whole cloth. So that's my opinion. But I also want to say about Shrikant's storytelling point that two things. I just took a vocal workshop, even though I'm not a singer, because I love the way they think about music. So one of the people said, you don't just sing la da 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 da. You sing, I'm going here. She pointed at a point on the wall. And then she made people with a straight line sing the phrase so that it ended up with their finger on the wall. Meaning just what Shrikant was saying. You're singing to a destination. You're not going da 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 da. You're going da 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 da. She just was making that point. And I listened with my mother to so much classical music, because at night we would just do that because she was into it. I listened to all of Mahler's symphonies and I was in heaven. I had to listen to like 32 Mozart symphonies before I could like one. I liked 33. But my point is, when I listened to the overtures of the operas I immediately loved them. And I think it's because Mozart said, oh, I'm telling a story here. And he dropped his cliches and he dropped his spinners and he tried to tell the story of the Magic Flute or the Marriage of Figaro and in the strings at the start of the thing. They're fantastic. So it's all about storytelling. That's my point.
Absolutely. The thing is that because of Mozart's nature, he can't do good symphonies. Beethoven can do good symphonies because
Thank
for
you.
symphony, you need that. What Mozart does very good is dialogues. Like, for example, Magic Flute, you look at the dialogues, you look at these small phrases going between people. That is where his genius is. He's very, very good at that. To say, okay, how will I capture the emotion and the right thing in music now? And so he is very good at this scale. Beethoven is very good at that scale. Going out of the Zoom window here. But wonderful point. Next up is Allison.
So you said it's okay to disagree with you. So
this is always true. You can disagree with me on anything at any time.
I really like Glenn Gould. I love the Goldberg variations. They're wonderful. And then the other thing, people, Madeline hates when I say this, but I for years have said that Mozart is music to eat brunch by. And she just like goes nuts when I say that. But it's so like, it's just sort of there in the background and it's lovely. But it doesn't make it, I don't feel anything. It's just like, oh yes, that's very nice. Okay.
Even operas, you don't like you don't like Mozart's operas either?
I mean, they're a little better, but I don't know. I'm very partial. I really feel like opera needs to be in Italian. I feel like it just doesn't sound right in other languages. I just don't, and people get really mad about it. Especially like English and German operas sound awful. They're so guttural, very guttural languages. They just need to be in Italian. They just do. Sorry.
No, that's I mean the thing. Sorry, go ahead. So go ahead.
I don't know, and I just feel like other musicians. I mean, like Beethoven and Bach and Rachmaninoff. You're feeling something, and you feel like you've been, like you can't just sit there in a restaurant eating it and ignoring it. You know, if it's if you hear it, you are responding to it. You have to stop what you're doing and pay attention. And I feel like if Mozart's playing, you know, you can, I don't know, you can clean the house, you can do anything, you know, you're like, oh, there it is. Okay. Isn't that love? And it's lovely, but you know, it's not, I don't know.
Yeah, no. I mean, the thing is that the other point here is that there are different theories of art, which are very different from each other and what art is doing. So all the romantics like Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Brahms, Beethoven, they are romantics. I mean, what they do with emotions, they will play the entire range of emotions on you. It's like one of my friends, you know, she used to say, this is like exercise in music, exercise in emotion. So it's like, you know, if you want to exercise your emotions, go ahead and listen to this because it will take you through all of that. Mozart doesn't do that. This is classical period. You know, it is beautiful, but it is not intensely emotional music.
Well, remember, I'm the person who loves Dostoevsky, so that should tell you something.
What's that?
I'm the person who loves Dostoevsky,
Yeah,
which is like literally going through the ringer. You're by the end, you're like, oh my God. And I need lots of scotch, and I don't even like scotch.
That one, or you know, for me, like Victor Hugo is like that. It's like, you know, you have very intense things going on and just tremendous changing versus, you know, it's like, it's beautiful. You know, if I wanted to call it a little bit, it's pretty. It is, you know, at a small scale level, it is beautiful and pretty. But something like Beethoven is of a completely different nature. I think Beethoven took music forward dramatically, just like Michelangelo, as compared to, you know, let's say the Greek art. I love Greek art, but Michelangelo has a level of expressiveness of what emotions can do in his art, which is at a new level. And it's kind of like Beethoven is like Michelangelo of music. Same thing with you know, you can see that, you know, somebody like Victor Hugo, what he does with literature, or Dostoevsky, what they do with literature, is at a different class than somebody before them. So yeah, so I think the romanticism. Go ahead.
Oh, I want art to make me feel something. Like if I don't want to feel something, I could just watch some silly TV show or something, you know, like there's a place for that when you just don't. But I feel like if I'm going to go to a museum or go into a theater, I expect to feel something like, you know, that's why I pay all that money and why, you know, it's supposed to do that, I think. If not, just, you know.
That's a great point about kind of, I mean, that's the heart of romanticism, you know. You like romantic art. That's what it is, you know, because Dostoevsky, that's what is common to all of this. What about visual art? What do you like in visual art?
Yeah, I do like stuff that's definitely makes me feel more, that's definitely more emotional and yeah, like some things don't do much for me at all, like Rembrandt, and kind of like
no, let's look at dance. You know, you know dance.
Yeah.
So how would you apply the same distinction that you are making between Mozart and Beethoven to dance?
Okay, there's a lot of modern choreographers that all they're doing is making pretty movement. It's like, oh, this is fun to do this step and fun to do that, but it'll never last the test of time, never. Like before, pre-pandemic, I would subscribe to this modern dance series at Penn. And each season you'd go to like 8 shows, and there were like maybe 2 that moved me. And it, you know, it's a fun, I go with a group of friends and we have dinner and, you know, it's fun, but there's so much of this that was just like left me feeling cold. But then the stuff that I really love, like Martha Graham, I loved it because it's so emotional and it's philosophical, and there's so much in there. I mean, she had Emily Dickinson's poetry, she had all the Greek tragedies, she had like Native American stories, even like in the movements, that even the ones you do in class, like there's elements of Buddhism, there's, you know, and it's all there, like a jumbo, like New Orleans jumbo, and it's just fascinating to dance, and it's so much fun to dance. Balanchine leaves me cold, although Balanchine is so much, it's really fun to dance, but I always feel like I want a story. I want, you know, I mean, I can watch it, I can appreciate it. He was genius, but it's a little bit like Mozart, where I can see the genius level, but it still leaves me feeling cold.
Wonderful. Marissa.
So a thought here when you guys turn to dance that came to mind for me is this question of teaching these arts. So I find that throughout the ages, it's the same problem. I mean, it's perhaps more prevalent now, but it's that facet that Allison is mentioning. It's the idea of somehow the passion, the emotion is not being translated. Like, so for example, you know, salsa comes from Puerto Rico, unless you ask a Cuban, and they're delusionally gonna tell you it comes from Cuba. They're wrong. No bias, I promise. So, you know, salsa is a traditional dance of, you know, Caribbean nations, right? I learned salsa as a little girl, you know, at my mother's stove. When most of the times I danced for all of my youth was with family. And it was kind of a wild style of dancing. As I get older and older, I see more variety of people who know what salsa, the dance is, and know how to dance it because they've learned it. They've gone and they've sought to learn the steps. The problem is it's so structured that someone would look at me and go, you don't know how to dance salsa, which is kind of horrifying because salsa comes from my country. How dare you, right? But it's what's missing. These people are beautiful. They're technically these gorgeous dancers. And it's so true. They have a skill that's unparalleled. I danced with a dance group, but I have nothing. Or some of these people, you can just go on a weekend and see the way they're dancing. It's technically proficient and visually delightful. But there's no feeling. It's very much, okay, spin, 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 dip, spin, spin. And so, they're going to do more spins and more dips and more twirls than we would normally naturally do. But it's missing the fun, the pleasure. And it's like, there's things that are part of the music that are the joy bleeding through, and you don't see that. And I feel like that's kind of what, Allison is maybe saying here. And I hope, if I'm not misspeaking, hopefully, it's just this idea of we somehow, if we over analyze something, you lose some of the passion. Because, if you ask people who are in dance studios, they'll tell you salsa has 8 steps. 8 steps. Anyone who plays the music, it's 4. If you're playing the music, it's only 4 beats. How do you get 8 steps? But in order to teach it, it's slowed down, and the tempo is broken apart. But that's not a natural break, which you don't understand, because in the classroom, they're teaching you the steps without the music. How can you learn to dance salsa without salsa? So anyway, that's my soapbox. Sorry.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Next up is Paul.
Yeah, see if you guys buy this or not. Comes from Hidden Brain on NPR, but it's very relevant. All right, take an S and turn it on its side, and you have a format for the story with the rise and fall we all need. You can't have too many rise and falls, and you can't only have one. So take Cinderella. Cinderella is starting at the bottom of the sideways S where she's drudgery. Then it goes to this high at the ball. Then it's back to the drudgery, and then the high where the shoe fits. And what you want in Mozart, what you want in dance, what you want in movies is some variation of that with that many rises and falls. Too many, and they defined it like COVID, like, it's cured. Oh, it's not cured. Oh, it's cured. Oh, it's not. But you don't want that in a story. So all of this can be encapsulated in that structure. There's my proposal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there are these structures. I see them in like symphonies, like the 4-part structure of like Beethoven's, where you set the theme up. In the first one, you're setting the conflict up. This is the thing that we are struggling with. The second movement is like the doldrums. You'll say, okay, now things are really, really bad. The third movement is kind of trying to get out from there, but there are so many false starts. Maybe this will work. Oh, no. Maybe this will work. No. And then the final movement is this triumphant kind of progression. So there is all of these, beautiful structures, and they're there in this. And in the hands of somebody who can really do them, they are just gorgeous. Like, for example, Victor Hugo, I really love his plots, because it's like there is some conflict, and just as it is being resolved, another larger conflict comes out from there. And it's completely unexpected. At the same time, as soon as it happens, you say, oh, of course. So it's like, it has to have element of surprise and element of inevitability at the same time. And that flip, just like it happens in like a joke, that needs to happen. I'll say, what? Oh, yeah, like that. So there are all these patterns that are playing. Marissa, I think your point about the dance is excellent. I mean, that's kind of, there is so many people, like I see that in Indian classical music. There are people who, like, on the paper, they know the notes, they can actually do the steps, but there is no life in what they're doing. And most artists don't get that. For me, the hallmark of a great artist is that they can do something very simple and it has this kind of profoundness to it. So it's a simple movement, they can do something. They can just say one line. And so many people have sang that same line. So many singers, but they can make that work. And it's not that they're doing anything like spectacular. Like they're not doing like acrobatics. It is not kind of technical performance. It is just understanding the flow and actually living the flow and letting other people experience that. So a wonderful point. Allison.
I was just gonna, when Marissa was talking about salsa, tango, that's the one. Tango is phenomenal. I mean, it's so, it's just so passionate, and it's just, it's not like a dance. Well, I guess in Argentina they would say it's, it's a club dance, but it's not. It's, I don't know. I think it's really amazing to watch. It's just, beautiful, and, and you feel something when you're watching it. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. So we are ready to wrap up. I want to tell you about the meetups coming up. Tomorrow, we are going to celebrate the conclusion of the series on the Tao. Jason and Amon have been doing such a wonderful job. So what we're going to do tomorrow is we are going to hear Jason's 20 verses in one sitting. So it's going to be from 60 to 81, something like that. This is the final installment of that. Jason particularly likes that because he gets to hear other people read his verses, which he has not been able to hear. So this is like many people reading his verses. So he enjoys that. And we'll be discussing that as well. So that it's a great way of getting an overview of Dao De Jing. And the Dao De Jing meetups are coming to an end. We're going to come up with something the weekend after that. I'm thinking, I think I've discussed this with Joe, but let's talk about it briefly. Joe, we can talk about it. I'll tell you about the other ones. On Wednesday, Sanjay is going to be here, and he's going to be talking about dreams. Why do we dream? From the neuroscience perspective. Everybody knows about that we dream. We know about what we dream, but why do we dream? And that's what he's going to focus on. So it's going to be about dreams from the neuroscience perspective. Sanjay has been doing incredible meetups, so don't miss that. On Thursday and Friday, we do the Dao meetups, Dao De Jing meetups, and we do Bhagavad Gita meetups. Sorry about that. The Bhagavad Gita, if you have not experienced it, please do. Yogeshwar is doing such a magnificent job, and we are going to come to chapter 11, which is an incredible chapter. Chapter 10, Yogeshwar managed to give such a large context of the Indian culture along with the chapter, and I think chapter 11 is another chance to do that. So I'm really looking forward to chapter 11. And so that's what is coming up. And okay, so that's all I had. Joe, if you are up for it, I want to just run the idea for the final, one filler meetup that we have for Dao De Jing. After which we are going for Confucius, folks. We'll be going through Confucius Analects. Jason and Amon are going to actually translate it for us. So what we're going to do is that just like Dao De Jing, they actually translated Dao De Jing, and they would explain it like character by character, pretty much. Confucius is not worth going character by character. His value is more of kind of worldly wisdom.
Right.
And so we're going to do that. So that's going to start on, I think, the first week of May. But in the meetup in the middle, Joe, I mean, we had discussed several ideas. One of the ideas was for people to come and talk about their favorite verses.
Yes.
You know, does that make sense to you?
I think that would actually be a meetup that would be worth having, and it would be perfect in between what would be the 26th, I think.
That's right.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, I think that would be a good meetup. And there was a couple of other suggestions as well.
But I think this one has best potential,
Me
because
too.
what happens is that each person gets to bring their favorite poem.
Yes.
And they read it out. I like to think of them as poems. They are poems, actually. They call it verses, but it's the same thing. It's so that let's do that. Okay.
I think verse 16 you'll probably be bringing, I'm assuming.
I don't know. I will probably. I always like to say, if nobody brings number 25, we have to start with that. 25 is like the whole summary of the Tao. Like if you want to read, if you want to hold I have always held the entire Tao with just 25. You just get 25, you get like the heart of the whole thing. So I'll probably go with that. All right. Does anybody else have anything else to say? Nope. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye.